Apart from its economic woes, the country faces a plethora of sanctions imposed by the West. In fact, amid the presidential polls in Iran, the United States has now issued fresh sanctions, as confirmed by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. So what are these sanctions? We tell you more in our next report.
Iran has been the target of sanctions imposed by the EU, UN and US since 2005 for violating agreements, refraining it from pursuing nuclear weapons. Iran's economy is suffering greatly as a result of these sanctions. Multiple sanctions have been imposed on Iran for its nuclear program, since UN's nuclear watchdog found that Tehran was not compliant with its international obligations. In the early 2000s, signs of uranium enrichment activity sparked fresh worries around the world, which led to a series of sanctions from the West. The goal of these international sanctions were to prevent Iran from obtaining materials related to nuclear energy and to apply economic pressure on the Iranian government to stop its work on uranium enrichment and other nuclear weapons-related projects. However, US sanctions on Iran long predate the nuclear non-proliferation concerns. Once allies, both nations have had fraught relations over the decades. Following the seizure of the US embassy in Tehran in 1979, the US government placed economic and political sanctions on Iran. Washington has maintained the ruling and even increased the penalties since then. Additional sanctions were imposed by the US in January 1984, when Iran-backed Hezbollah militant group was involved in the bombing of the US Marine base in Beirut. Iran was listed by the US as a state sponsor of terrorism that year. This triggered a host of sanctions, including restrictions on US foreign assistance, a ban on arms transfers, and export controls for dual-use items. The Joe Biden administration has also imposed more sanctions on Iran after its missile and drone attack on Israel on 14th April. In 2015, to get relief from sanctions, Iran, along with several world powers, including the US, signed a landmark accord, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA. Iran agreed to remove a large portion of its nuclear program and allowed more thorough international inspections of its facilities in exchange for the lifting of sanctions worth billions of dollars. But ever since President Donald Trump pulled the US out of the agreement in 2018, it has been in jeopardy. Brussels has imposed sanctions for human rights violations in addition to the non-proliferation sanctions. These include asset freezes, travel bans, and prohibitions on the export of equipment that might be used for internal repression or telecommunications surveillance. The sanctions have severely curtailed trade, drastically decreased Iran's oil earnings, and contributed to record low unemployment, skyrocketing inflation, and a decline in the value of the Iranian rial relative to the US dollar. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And for more on the elections in Iran, we are now joined by our correspondent Anas Malik, who is live from Tehran. And in fact, he has very strategically positioned himself right outside a polling station. Anas, thanks for joining us on the broadcast. Get us the latest. We know that we have a limited choice of candidates that are contesting in the elections this time. We have the conservative Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf, the hardliner Saeed Jalili, the moderate Masoud Pezeshkian, and the conservative Mustafa Pur Mohammadi. So what is the latest that you are picking up on the ground there?
Well, the mood is festive, the mood is charged up. You've got quite of a turnout here. I'm here outside the Husseiniya Irshad, and I'll ask Murtaza, our camera person and producer, to follow me. If you can just see, there are scores of people from both the genders, be that be men, women, or even children. People are coming in with their families to vote. to be part of this voting process. If you just walk in, you get a sense of that people are really in it in the entire process. They've been involved in it in a greater manner. You're seeing scores of people coming in, especially younger generation coming in. There is sort of a split within the Conservatives because there are three Conservative candidates who are running. First is the Bakir Khalibaf, second is Saeed Jalili, and third is Mustafa Por Mohammadi. So that makes the Conservative mandate get split, or the vote bank get split. But when it comes to the left or a reformist party, there is just one unified candidate, Masood Pezeshkian. And these young men or young people who are there out in the lines, the narrative that Masood Pezeshkian has been putting out is what has been resonating with them, and the narrative of change, that is something that they have been emphasizing on. So it's going to be a really interesting election as and when the polling ends. We're halfway through the polling already. It's roughly about 2 p.m. local time. The polling is expected to last at 6 with the provision of extension in timing. So largely speaking, as and when the votes are counted after the polling is finished, and then as and when the results start to come in, we should not be surprised in case if there is a shocker or if there is a dramatic change of events here in the Iranian presidential elections, as the people of Iran go on to elect their 9th elected president. Isha?
Anas, while you say that there could be a surprise in the outcome of the elections, do give us a sense of the task cut out for the new leader, considering the sanctions that have been levied on Iran as recently.
Well, the issue of the sanctions is certainly there. This election, you have to understand, is being run on three core issues. First is the economic problem. Second is the problem with regards to lack of political and lack of job security and economic stability or economic security. And third is lack of good diplomacy or lack of development of good relationship with neighboring countries. That is what this entire election has been on. So this issue of sanctions, it has been hurting the younger generation. They have been talking about it. They eagerly want Iran to reform. They eagerly want the country to open its doors, to mend its ways, and not to have this hardliner approach. So going forward, this particular sanction that the US imposed last night, to contextualize it, just hours before the Iranians went on to vote, will add to what the reformists have to say. But the implications of that, or the practical implications to that, would only be known as and when the results come in, because in case if there is a right-wing conservative government, then the results can be in adverse in the exact 360 of what the effect of the sanction could or potentially should have. Isha?
Okay, Anas, thank you for joining us on the broadcast. We will eagerly wait and watch and await the results as well. Thanks for joining us. For all the latest news, down